Mr. Chairman, this amendment strikes $186.3 million in funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. According to its website, the NEA is the largest funder of the arts and arts education in communities nationwide. Now, this is all well and good. I'm sure all of us here can appreciate the arts. I attend my daughter's concerts. We have pictures hanging up in our home, pictures hanging up in my office. We bought them. We pay for our daughter's instruments. We pay for their instruction in music. We go to the plays when we pay. However, again, we are $33 trillion in debt. We're headed for 36 in the next 18 months. According to a recent report given by USA 2023, in 2022, giving to the arts, culture, and humanity is estimated at over $24 billion. The funding in this bill is a drop in the bucket compared to those private sector contributions, yet it's still important to America, who's careening towards bankruptcy. Furthermore, there have been many debates about objectionable art funded by NEA grants, including nude or controversial topics. Our citizens, our bosses, our constituents shouldn't have to be forced to pay for these things that they find objectionable. One current example is the NEA's current focus on equity, which only divides Americans using identity politics. One way to completely avoid that debate is to stop subsidizing any of these projects. The NEA also operates several programs that, quite frankly, shouldn't exist, including the Art and Architecture Program, which commissions art for federal buildings, and the Arts and Artifacts Indemnity Program, which subsidizes the insurance of arts exhibitions, both domestic and international, including private collections. It's not enough that we pay for it here. We got to spend the money internationally, including private collections. This is your federal government. This is your federal tax dollars, of which we're borrowing right now to pay this bill. We just don't have the money for these programs. I don't have anything against Americans creating wonderful art or enjoying our wonderful art. I am one of them. The question is, should our taxpayers be paying for it? And I don't think that they should. I reserve.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Maine seek recognition?
I claim time in opposition to this amendment.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I just can't. I'm just so sad that we have to debate this amendment to eliminate funding for the National Endowment for the Arts. The NEA is the federal agency that funds, promotes, and strengthens the creative capacity of our communities by providing all Americans, that is all Americans, with diverse opportunities for arts participation. This very small, $186.3 million in this bill, the small but mighty agency supports arts organizations and artists in every congressional district in the country. And these investments yield enormous economic benefits. My colleague on the other side of the aisle says, well, he pays for his own arts. He makes sure that his family has the arts opportunities that his children's art is paid for. But you know what? Every community doesn't have the funding to pay for their own arts. Every community can't afford arts and music in their school, can't afford these opportunities. And yes, there's private sector funding, but private sector goes to where the private sector wants it to be spent. It doesn't make sure that in rural states like mine, that small towns can take advantage of this, that small arts organizations can have these opportunities. A 2021 analysis done by the Department of Conservation and the Commerce and the NEA found that arts and cultural industries added over $1 trillion to the U.S. economy, supports nearly 5 million jobs, and accounts for 4.4% of the GDP. 4.4%. In what other sector wouldn't we make a lousy $186 million investment in something that was going to add 4.4% to our GDP? These guys would be all over it if it was auto manufacturing or chips or something else. The arts have an incredible value as a positive tool for economic development, education, and community building. Defunding this important agency would cause catastrophic harm. It's a terrible idea. I oppose this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I thank the chairman. The question really should be, is this a federal requirement? Is this a federal responsibility? I agree with the gentlelady on a whole host of things she said about the economic impact of the arts and the humanities. The question is, should the federal government be doing it? And if there is a return on investment, and I agree there is, apparently it's worthy because in 2022, private industry, private contributions were $24 billion. That's awesome. We ought to encourage that. Now, maybe $186 million is a drop in the bucket in this bill, and I suspect it is. Where I come from, $186 million is a heck of a lot of money. It's a heck of a lot of money. And if you watch the 1 millions, the 2 millions, the 5 millions, the 100 millions, the 186 millions, maybe sometimes you can get to the fact that we're spending $2.2 trillion more than we're taking into the federal level this year. $2.2 trillion. You have to start somewhere, and you start with the ones, the tens, the 20s, the hundreds, the 100 millions. That's where you start. This is not a federal responsibility. It should be done by local and state if they want to do it. The federal government cannot sustain it and should not sustain it. I yield the balance.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
No, wait. I reserved.
Oh, my apologies. I'm so used to you yielding, I didn't notice that you had reserved. The gentlelady from Maine is recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just do that to trip you up every once in a while. But I would like to yield time to the chair of the committee, Mr. Simpson.
The gentleman from Idaho is recognized.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. I rise in opposition to this amendment, which seeks to eliminate funding for the National Endowment for the Arts. While I support the gentleman's intent to reduce spending, this bill already significantly reduces funding, including the NEA. The bill also requires, and this is what's important to me, frankly, the bill also requires that the NEA allocate at least 40% of its grant funding to state and local communities. Now, the gentleman mentioned the $24 billion that was given privately to the arts throughout the country. The problem is, none of that $24 billion goes to support an arts organization in Jerome, Idaho, or in Shelley, Idaho, or in Sandpoint, Idaho. What this does is make sure, and I emphasize this every time when I talk to the director of the National Endowment for the Arts, is that I'm concerned about the arts in rural communities. I've gone out to my communities throughout my district and met with these arts councils of what they do. Their funding is completely reliant, maybe completely is too broad a word, but substantially reliant on the grants that they get from the National Endowment for the Arts. So I oppose this amendment, and I yield back the balance of our time.
Reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. The gentleman.
I yield the balance.
Oh, the gentlelady has the only remaining time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I appreciate the words of the chair, and I appreciate his acknowledgement that it is the rural communities, whether it's in his state of Idaho or my state of Maine, where there are so many communities that don't have the benefit of the private funding. They don't have the benefit of wealthy parents who can maybe afford to pay for their children's music and arts education. These are communities that desperately depend on this funding. And I also want to say that while there is a lot of economic growth going on in the arts industry, that it's a huge contributor, that many of these, particularly the small venues, were the first to have to close their doors during the pandemic and the last to open, and many haven't recovered. Many people who work in the arts industry, many artists themselves, are still struggling to get back on their feet, and that just makes this funding even more critically important. This is a great way to make sure that everyone in America has the great educational benefit that all young people should have in arts and music and developing that level of creativity and curiosity. And there's so many wonderful educational benefits that we know come from having that education in the arts. This makes sure that it's available to everybody. We're already facing a cut in this bill. We're going from $207 million, which was never enough, it ought to be at least $1 per person, down to $186 million. So this cut has already been taken. We don't need to do any more, and certainly eliminating it would be a travesty. I oppose this amendment, and I yield back.